Members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints believe Joseph Smith was a prophet of God, just like Moses, Abraham, or Peter. As prophets sometimes tend to do, every now and again Joseph prophesied. Many of his prophecies are quite astounding and some are more confusing. We're going to take a look at some of them after the intro video. Did you know that Joseph Smith prophesied specifically about the Civil War and probably World War I? It's recorded in Doctrine and Covenants 87. He said the northern and southern states would be divided against each other and that war would break out in South Carolina, which it did at Fort Sumter in 1861, some 20 years after Joseph Smith's death.
The prophecy is true.
On a separate occasion, Joseph Smith prophesied in one meeting, 40 days shall not pass, and the stars shall fall from heaven. A skeptic in the congregation jotted down the prophecy, looking forward to proving Joseph a false prophet. 39 nights later, the skeptic watched as the 1833 Leonid meteor shower happened before his eyes. Some sources report 100 to 200,000 meteors falling per hour. Before Joseph Smith was killed by a mob in Carthage, Illinois, he also prophesied that his friend, Willard Richards, would be safe while bullets would fly around him like hail and he should see his friends fall on the right and on the left, but there should not be a hole in his garment. Willard was imprisoned with Joseph in Carthage, along with Hiram Smith and John Taylor. Joseph and Hiram were killed. John was shot in 4 places, but Willard miraculously left with the same amount of holes he came with. But not all of Joseph's prophecies have been that spectacular or clear. Modern critics cite several examples of prophecies they claim went unfulfilled. For example, Doctrine and Covenants 84 prophesies that a temple will be built in Missouri in this generation. Joseph's generation passed. No temple. What gives? We'll use this scenario to showcase a few principles that are important to understand when it comes to prophecy, though not all of them will perfectly apply to this example. First, the wording of the Missouri Temple prophecy echoes one given by Christ in Matthew 24. Christ lists a bunch of signs that will appear before and at the second coming. The sun will go dark, Christ will descend from the sky, angels will appear, the whole shebang. Then Christ says, "Verily I say unto you, this generation shall not pass till all these things be fulfilled." This gave many the impression that the second coming would happen in their lifetime. It didn't. Was Christ a false prophet? Of course not. It just suggests that maybe the word generation shouldn't necessarily be interpreted as a certain number of years, sort of how a day to God could be 1,000 years to us.
You keep using the word. I don't think it means what you think it means.
Second, it's hard sometimes to differentiate between a prophecy and a commandment. For example, if your kid's being a punk and you say, "You will clean your room."
Clean up your room, it's a complete mess.
I am Groot.
Is that a prophecy or a commandment? Sometimes the line isn't so clear, especially when it's written down and you're looking back on it from 50 years later. And based on Doctrine and Covenants 124, I personally think this temple prophecy was more of a commandment. Third, sometimes it's easy to mistake a prophet's personal opinion for a prophecy. I don't think that's what's happening in this temple prophecy, but in some others it is. Fourth, many prophecies, including many of Joseph Smith's that people claim to be failed, are conditional. If this happens, then this will happen. If the early saints didn't meet the conditions of some prophecies, then they may not have been fulfilled. And sometimes the fact that a prophecy is conditional isn't always clear. Something like this actually happened with the prophet Jonah at Nineveh. After the fish pukes him up, he goes to Nineveh, and he cried and said, "Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be overthrown." He states it as a matter of fact. In 40 days, Nineveh will be gone. There were no conditions explicitly set. But as it turns out, the prophecy was apparently conditional because the people repented and the city was saved. They lucked out. Fifth, God can do what he wants, as exemplified in Jeremiah 18. This is the NIV version because I kind of like it. It says, "If at any time I announce that a nation or kingdom is to be uprooted, torn down, and destroyed, and if that nation I warned repents of its evil, then I will relent and not inflict on it the disaster I had planned. And if at another time I announce that a nation or kingdom is to be built up and planted, and if it does evil in my sight and does not obey me, then I will reconsider the good I had intended to do for it." Doctrine and Covenants 105 suggests the Missouri Temple Commandment wasn't completed in the early days of the church because of the disobedience of some of the members. Now, I wish I had time to go over more of Joseph Smith's super awesome prophecies and more of his controversial ones, but at the very least, hopefully you've learned a few things and acquired a few tools for analyzing prophecy, both from modern and ancient times. I'm going to throw a bunch of further information in the description, along with a link to an article about this on our website. Check that stuff out. And if you've still got questions, feel free to drop it in the comments or message us on social media. And have a great day.